artist, but today I'm going to be talking about how art and history combined together work so well, and to learn a little bit about our history behind the art. So sit back, relax, and hopefully you enjoy the video. In the National Gallery in London in the UK, there is a painting that resides there by Paul Delaroche, which until recently I didn't know the subject matter. And you would think I would have looked at the plaque on the wall, but instead I admired the fine detail and the realistic qualities of the people and the story. And this picture was of our forgotten queen of 9 days, Lady Jane Grey. Jane's journey to the throne begins with Edward VI, who is heavily Protestant, and if he does not produce an heir to the throne, it would go to his sister, who was a Catholic, and that was Lady Mary at the time. Edward was not a very well child, and he was struck with an illness and stuck in his bed chamber in Greenwich Palace. This was now getting to the noblemen and the wider field, learning of how ill the king was, and they were starting to get worried that if there was no heir to the throne, then the throne would be lost to Mary, and she would therefore become the queen. Now, it was understood that the heir to the throne had to be a male, but by looking at the family tree, there were 8 females who were in line to the throne, and these were Edward's sisters, who was Mary and Elizabeth, his first cousin, which was Mary, Queen of Scots, and Francis, and her daughters, which was his second cousins, which was Jane, Mary, Catherine, and his other second cousin, Margaret. So there is no man in sight, and which is troubling to him. So to avoid a woman ruling the country, Edward was like his father, he believed in his religion. In 1553, Mary, his sister, came to challenge him about his religion. At the age of 37, she would hold illegal masses at her home, knowing full well that this was a sin to do in the eyes of her brother. This made Edward mad and with rage, and defying him, which hardened his views that she should never be queen. Now you may be wondering, where is Jane in our story? Well, as Edward was getting worse with his illness, he writes a document that states that only a male heir should be picked. However, due to the fact there was only females in line, it would be left to his second cousin Jane to produce a male heir. Now let's talk about Jane. Jane grew up in Leicestershire, and she moves to London when she's 11 years old under the king's uncle Thomas Seymour, and she becomes highly educated in French, Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and lots more other subjects. Lord Northumberland, who was the king's advisor, had a keen interest in Jane. She was betrothed to his son, which meant he had a step in the door to power. Jane and his son were both 15 when they got married, and by all records that I have read, it seems that she was forced into this marriage. Now moving on a bit, Edward was now on his deathbed, and he writes Lady Jane in the document, as well as her producing male heirs, which means if he was to die, she would therefore reign until she produced a male heir. If Mary found out about this, it could cause civil war, which was not what the country needed at this point. Mary is now told that Edward is ill, and she's also been told not to go to court as Northumberland is out to get her, so she flees to the countryside. Edward dies on the 6th of July at 8 p.m. Straight away the council spring into action, and the first light, Northumberland sends out his son to catch Mary the same day she finds out her brother is dead. Whilst all this was going on, the council get into their boats on the Thames, and they leave Greenwich Palace where they had been until the king had died. They head up to the Tower of London. Now in the 16th century, it was meant if you held the tower, you held the power, and it did this so Mary could not. Northumberland made sure the tower would hold any battle that came its way from Mary, and he sent troops and allies to secure the position of them getting to the new queen, who had not yet been put on the throne. On the 8th of July, Jane was to be queen. This was not released to the public, nor had it been released to Jane. On the 9th of July, she was summoned to Northumberland's home, Zion House, and had no idea why. This is where she is told that she is queen, and it is reported that she fainted and cried and didn't believe it was her place and believed Mary was the rightful heir. But she prayed to God that the job that has given to me gives me strength, and she accepted the role. Now Mary's still on the run. On the 9th of July, this is the start for Mary to begin her fight to the throne, and she believes she is the true queen. She is sending out letters of support to gain anybody from noblemen to countrymen to support her. The 10th of July comes around and the news has broken to the people that Jane has now become the queen. She heads to the Tower. This is her new life starting, and she doesn't even realise it. She enters the Tower of London, but whilst people are watching her, they are shocked that Jane's mother, who is very close to Jane, is carrying Jane's train into the tower. This seems odd, as the roles have reversed from mother to daughter, as a mother should never serve her daughter. 12th of July, Jane is now into her role as the Queen and is confidently signing letters as Jane the Queen. But at the same time, Mary is also out sending letters to her supporters and signing it Mary, the Queen of England. The call of arms is beginning to work, and the people are believing she is the rightful heir to the throne. On that morning, Mary relocates from Norfolk to Suffolk. While this is happening, Northumberland is getting ready to get an army against Mary as he stocks up the Tower of London. Northumberland was not only the controller of everything, but he was the puppet master to Jane. Mary seems at this point to be the underdog in the whole event. Jane's camp seems to struggle to get an army, but the public are supporting Mary's camp, and this is a worry to Jane. So in order to get her troops, she offers more money to anybody and everybody to be part of the army. Now, at this point, I just need to step back in time to explain why the people were supportive of Mary. This was because King Henry VIII had said towards the end of his life that if Edward did not produce an heir, Mary and Elizabeth could reign. But Edward, when he became king, thought he could change this when he had his power. As a result of this, both religions were rallying for Mary. This now means Northumberland and Jane's father are ready to move out of London and ready to fight Mary's forces. They're not worried, as they have all the weapons and they believe they are on the winning side. 14th of July 1553. Jane prior to this lived a very sheltered life, and this was all new to her, but she stood strong and was determined to do the job well. But Jane's power was just starting to look narrow, and the Privy Council, without Northumberland, was beginning to crack. As a queen alone in the Tower, there was only so much she could do. One of the things she did, which was interesting and we still do not know why, was she got an inventory of all that was in the Tower. This was from weapons to jewellery and so on. And I believe she probably did this because she thought it was to see what a woman like herself, who is now in power, needed to wear and how to show that she was powerful. But it still remains a mystery to this day why she did it. 15th of July, and Northumberland is now in place. He's in Cambridge. Now, at this time, he also had an army who was supportive of Jane, but bad luck was to come his way, as bad weather hit the ships and they had to come ashore, and the locals had persuaded the navy that they should support Mary instead of Jane, and they did this, and whilst they were doing this, they gave all their weapons over towards Mary's side. Now Mary not only had more support, but she had the weapons too. 16th of July, news comes out of the Tower to Mary's army. 16th of July, news comes to the Tower that Mary has a strong army. The Privy Council has now cracked, and they now know they're going to have a traitor's death upon them, so they have to think quick. Local lords are now on Mary's side. Jane has no one but Northumberland, and London was under threat and was ready for civil war. Jane commanded the Tower to be guarded, and she tried to lock the Privy Council in with her. 17th of July, Northumberland is in wait for extra forces, and they come. As he is ready to move on Mary's army, He does not know that the warships that he had has now left them and given the weapons to Mary. Whilst in the tower, they do know this news and they've started to worry. The treasury of the mint, however, during this time has gone missing, and it's believed that he gained more forces from Mary's support. Meanwhile, Jane is still in the tower and she's still writing letters of support to everybody and anybody who can help her. But sadly, these letters are way too late and they never get read. A message is sent to Northumberland that actually everything has changed. Mary's forces are stronger and outnumber him 3-1. He has weapons, but he is now outgunned. But his one last of hope was the Privy Council supporting Jane. But they're slipping away one by one, even her very own uncle. Time has run out, and on the 18th of July, this would now be the last day of Jane's reign. 19th of July. The council now seem to all be traitors, and they put their case towards Mary and declare their innocence and blame everything on Northumberland, and they all decide that Mary is now the true Queen of England. Now poor Jane is abandoned, and Mary now gets this news, and the council tell the public of Mary being the new queen, and the public cheer and they're overjoyed and there's parties in the street. Jane's father had to tell Jane the sad and sorry news that she would no longer be the queen. But Jane didn't cry and she wasn't upset, but in that very innocent and child way, she asked, "Can I come home now?" You have to remember, she was a 15-year-old girl. At all of this, she was still young, and even though she was educated, innocence was still there. She wanted to go back to her old life, which would never be possible. So she's now stripped of her clothes and all possessions and was escorted to a small house of the jailer within the Tower of London. Northumberland hears this news, and now he knows he is facing a traitor's death. It's all over. 20th of July, the council meet the new queen and beg for forgiveness, and she does grant it. So what happened to the rest of them? Well, Jane's father was spared, and Northumberland on the 18th of August was put on trial, and then on the 22nd of August he was beheaded on Tower Hill. Mary was sparing Jane's life. She didn't want to actually kill her. Whether it's because she was family or she felt that it would not only make the public think worse of her somehow, she just didn't want to do it. But she was getting pressure from the Privy Council. Now, while Mary was in reign, she brought back certain things that her family, i.e. her dad and her brother, had taken away. And the major thing was to turn the country back to being Catholic. This didn't sit well with a number of people, and during this time, a group of men decided to storm to the palace and try and take Mary's throne. In this group of men was Jane's father, and this time he would not be spared. I don't know if Mary thought Jane was part of why this riot had happened, but whilst Jane was alive, this was now a dangerous situation to be in. Mary spared Jane for months, but on 13th of November she put her on trial. Mary wanted to save her, but the public forced her to be on a public trial. She was found guilty. Even though people wanted Jane dead, Mary still didn't want to. While Mary was in reign, the country went back to being a Catholic state, and this was not for everyone. A group of men stormed towards the palace and tried to take Mary's crown, and in this group of men was Jane's father. This time, he would not be spared. And due to this, Mary had to make a decision. Keeping Jane alive would cause trouble to her crown and her throne. Due to this, Mary had to make a decision. If she kept Jane alive, this would be dangerous to her throne and her reign as a Catholic queen. On the morning of February the 12th, 1554, she was then executed. Now, you may ask, why did I look at this picture and then look at the backstory behind it? Well, because I truly love our history. Whether it's good or bad, it makes us who we are. And for poor Jane, it's one of the tragic sides of history. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a sad tale, I must admit, But from this, we did get some great art, and I hope you enjoyed watching me try and recreate a piece of art whilst talking about poor Jane's short time in power. Thank you very much for watching, and if you were listening as well, thank you very much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell if you want to see more videos just like this.